This video is sponsored by Menos. Get 10% off this UK-designed backpack for professionals by following the link in the description. This is the UK, and this is a map showing the Greenbelt. Over 1.8 million hectares of land which is off limits for urban development. The housing crisis in the UK has been getting progressively worse for years. Some commentators make it sound like the weather, it's natural, just something we have to put up with. But I suspect most people understand this crisis is the result of supply and demand. The UK has built too few homes since the 1980s. The average house price has continued to rise faster than the average income. The housing crisis isn't natural, it's the result of choices made by a succession of UK governments. This is a political hot potato. Some people are deeply worried that to build enough homes, the land will go from green and pleasant to concrete and tarmac. But is their fear justified? How much greenbelt do we need to build on to solve the UK housing crisis? If we could put some numbers to the problem or draw it on a map, then maybe it becomes easier to understand and we can move closer to solving the problem. Greenbelts surround the UK's largest and most prosperous cities. This is where the majority of people actually want to live and work, so it's not a coincidence this is where property prices are the highest. My first assumption is that the Greenbelt plays a large role in creating the housing crisis, so building housing in the Greenbelt is the best way to address the issue of supply and demand for the majority of the UK population. The next thing we need to consider is what an ideal housing market would look like. In my opinion, the least worst outcome for the UK would be if supply met demand. Then house prices and rents would remain flat for decades to come. Prices should grow at no more than the rate of inflation. No one goes into negative equity, but equally, no one gets rich because their house price doubles every few years. Just so we are clear, I am not some radical socialist. I'm a homeowner and a self-employed architect who makes his living from other homeowners. But I think the culture of celebrating ever-rising house prices has gone too far and risks hurting too many people. Now, you're welcome to disagree, but you will have to explain to a growing number of people why you think it's a good thing they should be priced out of home ownership or have to spend an ever larger proportion of their wages on rent. In recent years, the UK has built about 190,000 homes per year, which sounds like a lot. But according to a report published in 2019 by Heriot-Watt University, the UK actually needs to build 380,000 homes per year for the next 15 years in order to meet the current backlog and satisfy demand. That means double the current output of homes just to meet current demand. Let's assume this figure is correct and we need to find land for an extra 190,000 homes every year for 15 years. That doesn't count the homes actually being built right now. It assumes we can build twice as many and put the extra ones in the Greenbelt. So how much extra land would it take to accommodate an additional 190,000 homes every year? Well, that depends on your definition of a home. Let's assume we're going to build typical suburban housing developments. Now, I'm not a big fan of these developments. Maybe it's because I used to live in one, and maybe it's because I used to work on projects like this before starting my own practice. I'm not saying that soulless, car-dependent dormitory suburbs are the only answer to the UK housing crisis. I'm using this style of development because, like it or not, most people in the UK are familiar with them. This video is trying to look at a larger problem, and if using a common type of development helps people understand that, so be it. Property developers can squeeze about 40 homes per hectare into developments like this one. Sometimes more, sometimes less. They usually build a mixture of flats, semi-detached and detached homes to appeal to as wide an audience as possible. In case you don't know, 1 hectare measures 100 meters by 100 meters and is equal to almost 2.5 acres. If we can fit 40 homes per hectare and we need to build an extra 190,000 homes per year, that means we need 4,750 hectares of extra land every year to accommodate new suburban developments. And over 15 years, that comes to 71,250 hectares. That might sound like a lot of land, but remember, the UK has over 1.8 million hectares of greenbelt. 71,250 hectares is less than 4% of the greenbelt. That means we can satisfy housing demand and solve the UK housing crisis while preserving 96% of the greenbelt. Obviously, if everyone gets a detached house, we use more greenbelt land, and if we only build 20-story tower blocks, we use much less. I use developments like this for my calculation, and you are welcome to disagree with me. They may be boring and car dependent, but they sell like hotcakes. The point of this exercise is to put the Greenbelt and housing crisis into some perspective. We don't need to abolish it or even to build on that much of it to provide enough housing to ensure supply meets demand. I am well aware the housing crisis is complicated and there are more issues affecting this than just the Greenbelt, but just for fun, let's address some of the other issues people shout about when anyone wants to build more houses. The Greenbelt isn't precious. It's not the Lake District or the Scottish Highlands. The Greenbelt was created when the UK still had petrol rationing, and it was done to limit the cost of running public transport. A lot of the Greenbelt is municipal dumps, electricity substations and second-rate golf courses. The Greenbelt does contain agricultural land, but anyone arguing the UK needs this to be self-sufficient in food must realise the UK hasn't been self-sufficient in food since the mid-18th century. If you don't believe me, look up Tim Lane, Professor of Food Policy at City University London. Then there's the brownfield site argument. Fair enough, we should develop as much brownfield as possible, but it often costs more due to contamination, and brownfield sites are not always large enough or in the best location for housing. And then there's the people who blame everything on immigrants. I am an immigrant. If you want to have an anti-immigrant rant, don't do it in the comments section of my videos. The ever-rising cost of housing affects everyone in the UK. Even people who own their own homes outright still feel negative effects. Problems affecting the NHS, schools and the economy can often be traced back to housing costs. Even if the government spent unlimited money building schools and hospitals, what happens if the teachers and nurses can't afford to live locally? Over 1/3 of UK households rent, and over 14 million people in this country have a mortgage. If the cost to rent or buy a home keeps going up faster than inflation, those people have less money to spend keeping the economy going. House price rises should really be seen in the same light as a tax hike. Rising rent and mortgages as a share of income is like a tax on working people. When rent and mortgages go up, it means people have less to spend in local shops, pubs and restaurants, less money to save towards their retirement or to invest in UK businesses. That said, even if we radically reform the planning system and free up the land for all these extra homes, I don't think the UK construction industry has the spare capacity to build them, but that's a video for another day. Whether you agree or disagree, let me know in the comments. And if you are looking for a well-designed, hard-wearing backpack, check out this video I made about Menos. You can get 10% off your backpack and help support the channel. There's a link on screen and in the description. My name is Neil and I have been a self-employed architect in the UK since 2009. I regularly make videos about the reality of altering and extending private homes, as well as videos about the construction industry and the architecture profession. If that sounds like your cup of tea, please subscribe to keep up to date.